Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week we're back on the Model Railway Club lifting flap doing all the metal work. See you in a minute. Now you may recall in the very first episode of this long-running saga I made this exoskeleton of one side of this arrangement to show how it was all going to hopefully go together. There are a couple of minor modifications, but principally that is still the same route I'm going down. I'm putting a thicker 80/40 section in here, and I'll explain why in a minute. But other than that, everything is pretty much there. I've never been over happy with that hinge arrangement, because there's a lot of slop in that hinge itself, and that is using the ones that are supplied by the people that make the aluminium section. So we're going to do something about that as well, but other than that, fine. There is one minor complication. The board that I am matching up to here is the first of the corner boards, and it shoots off at about 30 degrees. And so therefore that angle where it meets is going to be off slightly, and furthermore, just to be awkward, they put a board on the side of that, like a back seam on the back of that board, which made it stick out 9mm further than all the other boards. Now the theory is, yes, you could just slice it down, it wouldn't make any difference one way or the other, but I want to try and make this as seamless and uninterrupted as I can, so that we just can take the other board out, put this one in, and vice versa at will. So I need to get the design on the thicker section aluminium as to how to get it to fit, if you like. So I'm going to take a piece over to the Railway Club tonight, have a look at it, see if I can scratch my head a bit, see how we get on with it, and see if we can come up with a solution for that one first. Right, now I had a good session at the Model Railway Club the other night. What I can do to make this work, and it will work well if I do this, I think, is to just cut one of these legs off this aluminium section. Just take it off about there. So I think if I get a bandsaw blade in at 45 degrees, I can just about cut down there, and I need to go down about 120, 130 mil. So I'm going to cut that down now, take it back over to the club, have another go at it, and see if that is the solution or not. Right, so that's the piece I've taken out, and I went over to the club last night, and whilst I won't say it fitted perfectly, it fitted well enough. There is one very minor addition or alteration to it. There is an extra section in the middle here that just needs to be taken out to clear a catch that's on the other board. So I think we're ready to now, I've measured up all the metalwork last night. I think I'm now ready to actually order materials. I've just hacked out the space for the clip on the board, so that should just about sort that piece out. So I'm just smoothing off all the aluminium where it's been cut. so that it's relatively good looking. We'll just tidy it up with a file, and then we can carry on and put this piece together with the rest of the framing. Now, there's one further change to the design, or the materials I'm using. In the very first iteration of the mock-up, if you like, I'd got these hinges which I was never really very happy with, so I was always looking out for something a little bit more substantial, and a colleague suggested he might have something to suit better, and sure enough he has. These are stainless steel butts with ball bearing in the hinge. They bring one other slight problem with them, but it's not really a problem, if you see what I mean. But they are much more substantial. The hole spacings sort of work okay. I think I'll be able to get the holes drilled through, 4 in there and 2 in there. It'll stick out slightly there, that's not a problem. I'll just put a piece of plywood under it or something like that. But that is a hinge I'm much happier with, so I'm going with that one, irrespective of the minor problems it brings up. So the problems are, firstly, that it sticks out a little bit further, and as I said, I can sort that out, but also it doesn't sit down level on the bench, which that one did. That in itself isn't a problem, because the hinge point has got to be at least as high, if not higher, than the track. Otherwise, when you hinge the board up, the track will crumple into itself and it will all get distorted. So I'm going to have to put a packer underneath, so it can then just take that curve out by putting the packer on one side or either side of that, and it'll work okay. So one thing I learned from doing the mock-up, which is why it is always useful to do the mock-ups, is not to do these rails separately. This is why I'm leaving this top rail in one piece until I've drilled, bolted, got everything ready, and then we'll cut it afterwards so it'll go back in a straight line. Because what happened with this one, I thought I'd marked and drilled it properly, but that is out of line with that slightly. There is a bit of room there, look, that is higher at that point, probably a millimetre out sideways, but worse still, it's sloping inwards. This board joint there, that rail is going off in that direction as well, so it just shows that, you know, however much you measure and carefully do it, unless you've got a CNC machine, you can well end up with something that ends up fairly wonky. Been doing a bit of messing around and sorting out these plates that I need for the hinges, so I then went and found a bit of clear perspex I've got, and I've cut 2 pieces this morning which will sit on top like that of the joint. What I've got to do now is just run through there with a small half round router bit which I've got, just to take that relief for the hinge. But I can also then put extra screws in there, and if I want to, a couple more bolts or fixings through into the hinge, into the aluminium as well, so it will sort of spread that load. And then once all that's drilled out and fitted, I can do the same thing as I'm doing with everything else, cut down that line, knowing that it'll all go back together in a straight line and everything should be hunky-dory. So I think the first thing to do is to get that relief taken out of the bottom so that we can fit the hinge snugly onto the perspex. Yeah, just slightest bit more now, but that's about right. That should do the job nicely. That's drilled the holes through from the hinges into the plates, so I know I've got a decent straightforward register on those. What I'll do now is sort out a spacing for some extra holes, probably one either side there, and then one either side on the line of the aluminium. And rather than go in through the sides like those two will, I'll probably go straight down the middle and get a fixing through in the middle of that one. Just spreads the load around a bit. Now I've established where the two holes in the timber top are going to be by working backwards from where the 40 by 40 section will come. I still haven't got that delivered yet, but I've got a piece that I can use as a reference. So once I've got that and the two hole positions marked, I can then drill down. I've got it set up in my drill press so that it'll be a vertical drill. I've levelled it across that way, and if I can then get that plate bolted down, I can put a couple of screws in as well, and that will actually give me the drilling position for the 40/40 aluminium that I can clamp on, and again do the same thing and work with the drill press to get it to be a dead straight hole through for the bolts. I've got the two hinge plates bolted onto the board. They're in line with one another, straight along the join line. That's good. I can't do a lot more until the actual metalwork arrives, but now that gives me a good base because that in itself is solid, and it means I can just hold a piece of 40/40 and clamp it, or indeed bolt it to the side of the board and then do the drilling, and we've already got the pilot holes done and ready on each side. So to step forward, we'll just have to now wait for the metal to arrive. Right, I've got a bit of excitement in the shed. I've just had a delivery from KJN of all the aluminium, so we'll get that in and check that first. I usually nowadays unpack things on camera, that way there's I've got proof if there's anything missing that or damaged, that it wasn't done after it arrived. Fun with that one. I've got the original order in front of me, so I can check them off as they come, and there's probably a delivery note on it anyway. All present and correct as ever with KJN, nicely packed. I've marked out the first two pieces, which are the important ones. These are the rails that bolt either side. I'm going to bolt them to the actual board itself first. Marked out where I need the holes for those. And then from then on, if I can get that to work, I'll cut the gap on the centre line, and the rest of it is more or less like Meccano. So let's get these mounted. got one side done. There's 5 fixings on either side, so there'll be 10 on each hinge section, bolted through to the aluminium in 5 places. It's bolted 6 places. It's bolted through to the wood in 4. So I think they're all bolts with nuts underneath, so it's not going into the wood or anything, it's just going through and being clamped. The actual rails are bolted on solidly onto the side with 3 8mm bolts in each half. So I think if it's going to fail, there's nothing more I could do about it, because that is engineering overkill to a fairly high extent when you think a normal internal door is hung with 2 of those. Well, that's the point of no return. Rightly or wrongly, we now have 2 baseboards. The hinges are all been bolted up as tight as they possibly can be with the hinge pins themselves. They're not going out of alignment when I do that, there's no slop in it. So I'm going to attach them back now to 1/2 on both sides, and we'll then see how we get on and see whether or not it works as a flap. That's all bolted up now, and it appears to work nicely. But this is the bit I was most worried about, but there's just no rock or movement at all in that, and it's going as straight as a die. Right, that's got me a lifting flap that I'm happy with. That works nicely, there's no play in it at all, so that can now go on to the rest of the framework, which I'm going to put it together loosely at the moment. The beauty of this stuff is that I can adjust it later. I'm just going to hook the whole thing up as I think it will need to be, take it over to the club, and we'll start and do some final adjustments and things like that. So that'll probably be my last video, getting the whole thing set up, installed, and then we can worry about things like electronics and laying the track on it and things like that. But really this is the biggest and most important thing, that I've got a lifting flap which has got no play in it at all and comes down in exactly the same place every time. So that's really the whole point of the exercise. Hope the video was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next time. We'll be doing something different in the shed. I'll see you then. Bye.